Brothers and sisters, we hear in this first reading the story of Abram, who becomes Abraham. And what we hear is this promise that God makes to him that his descendants will be like the stars of the sky and the sand on the seashore. And it's interesting to see that Abraham believed. You know, it's very important for us to take a look at that, because he was already somewhat old and he had 0 children. And imagine if somebody today who was advanced in age said to you, "Yeah, God told me I'm going to have descendants as numerous as the sand or the dust of the earth and the stars in the sky." What would you think? We have a nice little room for you. It's padded. Here's a jacket for you. So faith is something that it sometimes means walking in the dark, and it sometimes means having to guard what has been revealed. I mean, Abraham didn't just go around telling everybody this stuff. They would have thought he was crazy. And we hear that in Jesus' words in the Gospel of Matthew today. "Do not give what is holy to dogs, or throw your pearls before swine, lest they trample them underfoot and turn and tear you to pieces." That's what that means. I remember years ago in seminary, I had this professor for spiritual theology, and he says to the class, he goes, "If your bishop or your superior sits down and asks you how your prayer life is, you tell them, 'With all due respect, mind your own business.'" That's what he said. He said, "What you should say is, that's between me and my spiritual director." Now, there's certain things that are supposed to be in their proper places. It's not easy to walk in faith. If we're honest, it's not easy. Because sometimes we wonder, well, maybe it's supposed to be this way, maybe it's supposed to be that way. Right? Same with Abraham. And sometimes we wonder whether or not, it's even possible the thing that we think that God is promising us. That's what Sarah and Abraham eventually would have to face when God visits them at this terebinth of Mamre that we hear that they settle at. And God announces to them, even after Sarah has basically said, "No, it's not possible. You're going to have descendants through Hagar, my servant, and it's going to be through Ishmael," kind of a thing. Well, God comes back 13 years later after Ishmael's already 13 or 12, and announces that, when he comes back next time this year, she's going to have a child. And she laughs, but not with joy. She laughs with derision. She laughs thinking, "Yeah, right." We want to look at that. That's the first thing that happens whenever we hear something that's a little bit beyond our own human experience. We think, "Yeah, right." And it's okay that that's our first reaction, so long as it's not our last reaction. Because first thing is, "Yeah, right." Then the second is, "Maybe." Well, maybe. And then the third is, the person who said this, they recognized that the person who said this was God. So at a certain point they realized, well, if God said it, even if it's beyond my understanding, I'm going to open up to the possibility. And it says in the book of Hebrews that Sarah believed. So it's interesting, in God's record of things, God counts that as righteousness, even though there was the first reaction of, "Yeah, right." God counts the process as part of our yes. Thanks be to God, right? Because the same thing with Abraham. As he's looking up, if God says, "Hey, look up and see the stars," and that's how your descendants are going to be, or that your descendants will be like the dust of the earth. the first thing might be, yeah, maybe I'm hearing things. That's the first reaction. But in the walk with God, as one begins to understand God's voice and recognize the difference between one's own thoughts and God, and then one's own thoughts, God, and the enemy, who likes to try to throw things in there sometimes, right? We're called to be willing to risk with God. It's not easy. So today we ask God for faith. That's what we're asking God for. For the simple virtue of faith that we know comes from Him. The letter of the Hebrews says that Jesus is the author and perfecter of our faith, and I always think that's great because He'll take my little faith and He'll author it to perfection. So I just need to say yes to Him, to what He wants to do in me. If God has made the promise, or if He's made the statement that Jesus is the author and perfecter of faith by the Holy Spirit, then I need to trust what Holy Spirit has said through the Scriptures about my own faith being perfected and authored by Jesus. Good thing is we're going to meet Jesus this day, and so we ask Him in this Eucharist, as we receive Him in His body, blood, soul, and divinity, that He may bless us not only with faith, but with every blessing He wants to give us that requires faith for us to receive. Amen.